The autumn leaves crunched under my feet as I walked up the familiar brick pathway to my childhood home in suburban Chicago. The two-story colonial house stood proudly among the maple trees, its white shutters freshly painted, and the front porch adorned with Mom's signature fall decorations, pumpkins, corn stalks, and a wreath that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I could already hear my brother Marcus's booming laugh from inside, probably regaling our parents with another story about his latest business venture or his new BMW. At 32, he was everything our parents had dreamed of in a son: tall, confident, successful in real estate, married to the perfect suburban wife, Jessica, with their picture-perfect twin boys. And then there was me, Emma, 28, single, working as a nurse at Chicago General, living in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the north side. The daughter who still hadn't figured it out yet, as Marcus loved to remind everyone. "Emma's here!" Mom's voice called out as I stepped through the front door, the familiar scent of her apple cinnamon candles filling my nostrils. "Well, well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Marcus said from the living room, not bothering to get up from Dad's recliner. He was scrolling through his phone, probably checking his portfolio or browsing listings for million-dollar homes. "How's the apartment treating you, little sis? Still using that hand-me-down furniture from college?" I forced a smile, hanging my coat on the antique brass hook by the door. "It's fine, Marcus. How are the boys? Growing like weeds. We're actually looking at houses in Winnetka now. You know, real adult stuff, good school districts, property values, building equity." He finally looked up from his phone, his blue eyes gleaming with that familiar condescension. "Maybe someday you'll understand what it's like to have real responsibilities." Dad emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel, his gray hair thinner than I remembered from my last visit 2 weeks ago. He'd been looking more tired lately, the stress lines around his eyes deeper. "How's work, sweetheart?" "Busy. We've been short-staffed, but I picked up some extra shifts last month." I didn't mention that those extra shifts were specifically to help with something they didn't know about yet. "Still playing nurse, huh?" Marcus chuckled. "When are you going to get a real career? You know, something that actually pays the bills?" "Marcus," Mom warned gently from the kitchen doorway, but there wasn't much conviction in her voice. She'd heard this conversation 100 times before. "I'm just saying." Look at where Jessica and I are at our age. 3 years younger than you, and we've got a house worth $650, 2 kids, investment properties. Meanwhile, you're still renting and..." He gestured vaguely in my direction. "Doing whatever it is you do." I bit my tongue, a skill I'd perfected over the years. What Marcus didn't know was that my whatever it is I do had been quietly keeping this family afloat for longer than I cared to admit. But that wasn't a conversation for today. Maybe not ever. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom announced, clearly eager to change the subject. "Marcus, would you help your father with the chairs? We're eating in the dining room tonight." As we gathered around the mahogany dining table that had hosted every major family celebration of my life, I noticed Dad struggling slightly with his chair. His arthritis had been getting worse, but he was too proud to mention it. Mom bustled around, serving pot roast and mashed potatoes, the same Sunday dinner she'd been making for 20 years. "So," Dad said, carving the roast with steady hands, "your mother and I wanted to talk to you both about something." Marcus perked up, his real estate instincts probably sensing opportunity. "What's up, Dad?" Mom sat down heavily, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Well, we've been talking, and we think it might be time to consider downsizing." The word hung in the air like a storm cloud. This house was everything to our family. The place where Marcus had scored the winning touchdown in the backyard, where I'd had my first heartbreak on the front porch steps, where every Christmas morning and birthday celebration had unfolded. "Downsizing?" I asked quietly. "The house is just so big now," Mom continued, her voice slightly unsteady. "And the maintenance, the property taxes, it's getting to be a bit much." Marcus leaned back in his chair, and I could practically see the dollar signs in his eyes. "Well, that makes sense. This place has got to be worth what? 450? 500? Great investment over the years." Dad nodded slowly. "We bought it for $80,000 in 1988. Your mother's right, though. It's time." "Where would you move?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. "There's a nice senior community about 20 minutes from here," Mom said. "Sunny Acres. It's got a golf course, activities, and the maintenance is all included." "Sounds perfect," Marcus said, already pulling out his phone. "I can help you guys navigate the sale. I know this market inside and out. We'll want to list it in the spring for maximum value." I watched my parents' faces as Marcus dove into real estate talk, listing prices, staging advice, market conditions. They nodded along, but I could see the sadness in their eyes. This wasn't about money or market value to them. This was about letting go of 35 years of memories. "What do you think, Emma?" Dad asked, and I realized I'd been quiet for too long. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I think you should do what makes you happy." Marcus snorted. "Of course you'd say that. This is grown-up stuff, Em. There are financial implications here, tax considerations, capital gains. It's not about feelings." "Maybe feelings matter more than you think," I said quietly, but he wasn't listening. He was already sketching out a timeline on his napkin, talking about pre-market preparations and comparable sales. Later that evening, as I helped Mom clear the dishes, she caught my hand gently. "Are you okay with this, sweetheart? I know how much this house means to you." I squeezed her hand, feeling the familiar softness of her skin, the wedding ring she'd worn for 37 years. "I want whatever makes you and Dad happy, Mom. That's all that matters." But as I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel of my reliable Honda Civic, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was shifting in our family dynamic. And Marcus's words echoed in my head. Real adult stuff, grown-up decisions, financial implications. Maybe it was time to show him what this little sister was really capable of. Chapter 2. The Secret. I kept. 3 weeks later, I sat in my kitchen at 6 a.m., laptop open on my small dining table, reviewing my bank account before my shift started. The numbers told a story Marcus would never believe. A story of sacrifice, planning, and the kind of responsibility he claimed I didn't understand. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Coffee later? I have some updates about the house situation." I typed back quickly. "Of course. Usual place at 2? Stella's Cafe had been our mother-daughter meeting spot for years. It was a cozy little place on Lincoln Avenue, with mismatched chairs and the kind of homemade blueberry muffins that made you forget about calorie counting. I arrived first, choosing our regular corner table by the window, and watched the Chicago traffic crawl by in the October drizzle. Mom walked in 10 minutes later, her umbrella dripping and her usually perfect hair slightly mussed from the wind. But it wasn't the weather that had her looking frazzled. There was something else in her eyes, a worry I'd been seeing more often lately. "How's Dad?" I asked as she settled into her chair, ordering her usual decaf with extra cream. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." She glanced around the cafe, as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Emma, I need to tell you something, and I need you to promise me you won't say anything to Marcus." My stomach tightened. "What is it, Mom?" She pulled out a manila folder from her purse, her hands trembling slightly as she opened it. Inside were bank statements, medical bills, and a letter from their mortgage company that made my blood run cold. "Your father's been having more health problems than we've let on," she whispered. "His blood pressure medication, the physical therapy for his back, the cardiologist visits. Our insurance covers some of it, but the copays and deductibles." I studied the numbers on the papers, my nursing background helping me understand the medical costs while my secret financial knowledge helped me understand the bigger picture. "Mom, how long has this been going on?" "About 2 years, maybe longer." Her voice cracked. "We've been using the home equity line of credit to cover the gap, but we're almost maxed out. The mortgage payment has been challenging." My heart broke as I watched my proud mother admit their financial struggles. This woman had worked as a school secretary for 30 years, had managed every penny of their household budget with military precision, had never asked anyone for help. "How much are you behind?" I asked gently. 3 months. The words came out as barely a whisper. "The bank sent a letter last week. If we don't catch up soon..." She didn't need to finish. Foreclosure was a word that didn't belong in the same sentence as our family home. I reached across the table and took her hands. "Mom, why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because you're just starting your life, sweetheart. You shouldn't have to worry about your parents' problems. And Marcus, well, Marcus has his own family to think about, his own expenses." But Marcus didn't know what I knew. He didn't know that for the past 18 months, I'd been quietly transferring money into an account my parents didn't even know existed. He didn't know about the overtime shifts I'd picked up, the side work I'd done filing medical records from home, the vacation I'd skipped and the dinners out I'd foregone. "Mom, what if I told you that you don't have to worry about the mortgage anymore?" She looked at me with confusion. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed her my banking app, scrolling to the account I'd labeled Family Emergency Fund. Her eyes widened as she saw the balance, enough to cover not just their past due payments, but several months ahead. "Emma, where did this money come from?" "Extra shifts, some freelance work, careful saving. I've been preparing for something like this." I didn't mention that something like this had been keeping me awake at night for months, worrying about their financial security. "Sweetheart, I can't let you..." "Mom, listen to me." I leaned forward, speaking with the authority I'd learned from managing life and death situations in the ER. This money has been going toward your mortgage for months. I've been making payments directly to the bank. You're not behind? You're actually ahead. The color drained from her face. What? I set up an automatic payment system. The bank thinks it's coming from Dad's account, but it's been coming from mine. You're current on everything. She stared at me as if I'd just told her I'd been secretly living on Mars. How is that even possible? I called the bank, explained that I wanted to help my parents with their mortgage as a gift. They set up the payments to come from my account but show as paid by you. It's perfectly legal. Mom started crying then. Not the delicate tears of a proud woman trying to maintain composure, but the deep, relieved sobs of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight. Why? She managed to ask through her tears. Because you're my parents. Because this house is our family. Because Marcus isn't the only one who understands responsibility. We sat in silence for a while, her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. Mine scrolled through payment confirmations on my phone. Finally, she looked up at me with wonder in her eyes. Does this mean we don't have to sell? I smiled, feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in months. Not unless you want to. The house is secure, Mom. Dad's medical bills are manageable if we plan carefully, and I can keep helping with the mortgage for as long as you need. But your own life? Your own future? This is my future, I said firmly. Family is my future. As we left the cafe, Mom walked differently, straighter, lighter. She kept looking at me like she was seeing me for the first time, her baby girl, who had somehow become the family's financial foundation without anyone noticing. Emma, she said as we reached our cars, what should we tell Marcus about the house? I thought about that for a moment, remembering every dismissive comment, every lecture about real adult responsibilities, every time he'd made me feel small and incapable. Let's see what happens, I said. Maybe it's time for a few surprises. Driving home through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past the high-rises and brownstones, I felt something I hadn't felt in years around my family. Confidence. Not the defensive kind I'd learned to wear like armor, but the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your actions match your values. Marcus could keep his lectures about being a real adult. I'd been living it quietly, consistently, and effectively for years. Soon he was about to find out exactly what his little sister was capable of. Chapter 3. The Assumption. 2 months later, the call came on a Tuesday evening while I was meal prepping for the week ahead. Mom's voice was excited but nervous. Emma, we've made a decision about the house. I set down my knife, giving her my full attention. What did you decide? We're going to sell, but, well, we want to keep it in the family. We were hoping one of you kids might be interested in buying it. My heart started racing. This was the moment I'd been both hoping for and dreading. What does Marcus think about that? Oh, he's thrilled. He's already talking about renovations and his ideas for the backyard. I think he's planning to sell his current house and move the family in. Of course he was. In Marcus's mind, this was probably destiny. The successful son inheriting the family home, continuing the legacy. He'd never consider that his irresponsible little sister might have other plans. Mom, before Marcus gets too excited, I think we need to have a family meeting. All of us together. Is everything okay, sweetheart? Everything's perfect. But there are some things we need to discuss as a family. We arranged to meet the following Saturday. I spent the week preparing, gathering documents, making phone calls, and working with my mortgage broker to finalize details that would soon shock everyone involved. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, typical for December in Chicago. I pulled into my parents' driveway to find Marcus's BMW already there, along with Jessica's white SUV. Through the living room window, I could see Marcus gesturing animatedly, probably describing his grand plans for their family empire. Inside, the scene was exactly what I'd expected. Marcus was spread across the coffee table with architectural magazines, sketching room layouts on a legal pad. Jessica sat beside him with her phone out, probably researching interior designers. The twins were in the basement playing video games, their laughter echoing up through the heating vents. Emma, Jessica called out with her practiced smile. We were just looking at ideas for opening up the kitchen.